Men who instinctively take personal responsibility for themselves and their families eventually realize that being atomized, rootless cosmopolitans inhibits their ability to exercise their willpower. Male agency naturally leads into the creation of a patriarchy. Raise your sons to be strong, masculine, and dominant. Raise your daughters to be soft, feminine, and submissive. The bad behavior that we see from women today is simply a rebellion against men's failure to benevolently dominate them. The failure of Western society is a failure to maintain the patriarchy.
Well, here we are. We are back for episode 14 of Patriarch Hour. I'm James Fox Higgins, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friend Noah Revoy. Noah, how are you this evening? Today?
Doing good. Got the beard gains going. I haven't shaved or trimmed it since the beginning of quarantine, and so I'm measuring quarantine by how close it gets down to my belly.
Great. Well, I do see some massive gains there, so going well. And I thought I noticed some gains in the other areas going on too. And I saw your arms before, looking good.
Yeah. It's amazing without weights. If you continue to be regular and do some volume and challenge yourself, push yourself till your muscles are sore, you can still continue to get in shape. So I'm looking forward, though, to them reopening the gyms. I hope it's one of the first places they reopen.
Yeah, it hasn't been a problem for me because I knew this was coming. So I went and bought a whole bunch of gym equipment and set it up in the other room of the studio. So I've had my full weights program going as normal, which has been good. I'm very blessed in that way. So we're not talking quite so much about musculature tonight as we may like to. We're talking about vulnerability and where it is and is not appropriate, and how it ought and ought not manifest in men. So let's dive right in. We're going to hit the hour neatly today.
Yeah, I think that it is something that's very misunderstood. And it's misunderstood in two ways. There's people basically take extremes. And modern pop culture, and we have to understand, modern pop culture is not our culture. It's not Western culture. It's actually very critical and subversive of Western culture. But it promotes the idea that men should be vulnerable, that they should be sensitive. And this is really just a gigantic societal shit test. You've probably seen television shows or movies where the lead character says she wants a sensitive man who's vulnerable, who will cry when he sees a movie or whatever. And this is programming, trying to control what women want and programming them to think they want a sensitive, vulnerable man. But it's a trap for both men and women. When you hear a woman say she wants a sensitive man, if you're a woman and you're her friend, or you're a man and she's shit testing you, ask her to tell you, what is a sensitive man to you? What do you mean by this? You'll almost always find she describes a male girlfriend. She's not describing a man. And that's an essentially parasitic relationship. What she wants is a relationship where she has all of the benefits of associating with a strong male provider and protector who will provide, the masculine services without any of the expectations.
Or the challenge.
Women, or the challenge, or having to bend it all to his needs as well. Yeah. Women don't want to have sex with sensitive men, with vulnerable men.
Well, that straight away when you start talking about the propagandizing women to or men saying, "Oh, I'm going to be a sensitive guy to get the girl." Well, it's almost guaranteed now that she's going to be off fucking Tyrone around the corner before long if you're too sensitive and too feminine.
Yeah. Well, nature wants balance, and so if you're a very vulnerable, sensitive, fragile man, she's going to look for the strongest, least vulnerable, least fragile man that she can find. And it doesn't mean that either end is going to be healthy, because she might have to put up a lot of negatives to get that. Even married women who encourage their husbands to become more vulnerable and sensitive, they find that ends up being a turnoff. Now, the women, I don't think women do that because that's actually what they want. I think what it is they're unsure of their husband's strength and masculinity. And the way that they find out is by testing him. Now, a lot of people, they look at a shit test as purely negative. The reality is a woman will not shit test you if she doesn't have some interest in you. She's doing this because she wants to know, are you father material for, am I going to let you and am I going to invest in you as the father of my kids or not? And if you can't stand up to me, she thinks, how are you going to stand up to other men, Yeah. And she will test you, and it'll make you stronger if you understand. It's not about passing the test. It's about keeping order so that the test isn't necessary. And she'll find out, oh, that's not necessary. And eventually those tests will fade away if you're passing them.
Yes. Yep. And I guess that's the thing, is there's only a certain number of times that a woman will shit test a man before she decides, I'm tired of constantly having to poke at the edges of his strength and find out if I'm secure. I'm not secure here. If I have to keep testing him, I'm not secure. And women crave security, more than anything. They crave stability and security, and they need that. They need to have that sort of tame barbarian masculine energy around them, as you say in our introduction to Patriarch Hour, that benevolent dominance. They really require that in order to give them a safe place to be feminine. And we need to sort of be that container and that outer wall to protect them. And if they have to keep testing because they're not sure, it doesn't matter how strong you think you are. If she doesn't think that if she thinks she needs to keep testing you, she feels insecure, and that's going to end in her walking away unless you begin to pass the tests. And as you say, the best way to pass the test is actually to show her that the tests are unnecessary, to be in control of the narrative rather than let her test you. In fact, letting yourself be shit tested is failing the shit test.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about it is that there are much better ways than arguing or fighting with your woman to show her that you are a strong man and aren't going to be pushed around. You can simply show that to her in the way you live your life and in the way you interact with other men. You might be in a male group. You don't have to be at the top of the hierarchy. Just being in a hierarchy shows her that if you're in a hierarchy of good men, not only are you strong, but you've got allies who are strong. You have other men who have your back, and other men who won't let you be weak. Because in a good male hierarchy, we remove the weakness from each other. We refine each other. And that's partly why women find that so attractive, men who are part of a group. Some of the movies actually that have come out, not recently, because this would probably be impossible to make at the moment with the super woke movies that we end up getting. But there was a movie a few years ago, close to 20 years ago, called Bedazzled, with Brendan Fraser and Elizabeth Hurley. And basically Elizabeth Hurley's the devil and Brendan Fraser is a relatively weak man who decides that he gets a bunch of wishes, I think 7 wishes. And instead of working hard to make his life better, he tries to wish his life better. One of the wishes he makes is that the girl he's interested in says something about wanting a sensitive man. So he wishes he was the most sensitive man in the world. And so that scene, the way that is resolved is that it starts off with him crying on a beach, and he's holding her and crying on a beach and talking to her, and as he gets more and more vulnerable, you can see her getting drier and drier and just shrinking back from him. Yeah. And at the end of the scene, some big buff guy comes along and takes her away, and she's completely sick of him. Within about 3 minutes, she gets sick of it.
That's straight up like the Mr. Atlas, was it, ads that they used to print in the magazines for men to attract them to bodybuilding. With the Chad coming along and kicking the sand in the virgin's face and taking his girl. It's the archetypal hypergamy scene.
And if you're the guy that's getting the sand kicked in your face, this is going to seem really unfair. And you as a man can look at it like, if you are a oversensitive, fragile man and you're the guy getting the sand kicked in your face, you're the guy that women are getting turned off of because you're too fragile and sensitive. You can either look at that as, oh, this is unfair, or you can say, thank God, now I know where my... this is all toxic masculinity. I don't have any masculinity. Therefore, any actual masculinity must be toxic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's people pretend they don't want what they can't have. And so what happens if you're in that position is you can either complain about it, or you can say, thank God someone pointed out my weaknesses before I got to the point where I was too old to actually attract a woman.
Yes.
And start using that to fix yourself.
Yeah. And then the action takes place.
Yeah.
That's the responsibility. If you want things to change, action is required. Wishes won't do it. Didn't do it for Brendan Fraser.
Yeah.
And certainly won't do it for you either. So taking action and action requires a rational, clear vision of the situation, and you have to be able to take that painful pill and say, yeah, okay, I'm not actually good enough. You can't blame it on female hypergamy. Women are what they are. You can't blame it on the government and the legal. Resist the urge to go MGTOW and just hit the gym instead.
Yeah. And, I think it makes sense for men who are at the low end of the scale to spend some time in MGTOW while they improve themselves. I wouldn't say completely cut yourself off from women, but you could say, I'm not going to think about women romantically for the next 2 years. I'm just going to get myself in shape. I'm going to, learn how to make a living. I'm going to learn how to be a man. I'm going to get into a male group and spend, a couple of years doing that, especially if you're young, if you're under 30, do that, because the quality of woman that you'll be able to attract is so much higher that it's going to be a lot more motivating to continue your growth. If all you can attract
your self-sufficiency will be really attractive to the women as well. Your independence and your ability to be okay without her will actually be something that drives her crazy in a good way. It'll turn her on. And yeah, this is it. It's like MGTOW is a philosophy of walking away and, abandoning women. What you're describing is a strategy to prime yourself, prepare yourself, and be ready to find a great partner. And it's absolutely wise.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is too that when you can attract better quality partners, it's much more motivating for you to continue to improve. There is, improvement is not a straight line. The initial part of improvement is really, really tough. When you want to first start getting in shape, it's really hard to make yourself go to the gym. If you do it long enough, if you make yourself exercise long enough, if you make yourself eat healthy, after a while, you start to enjoy it. You start to get rewards. You start to be able to look in the mirror and say, I look pretty good. This is kind of motivating. And now I don't want to eat junk because I don't want to ruin all the hard work I did in the gym. And you get this, virtuous cycle. You get a virtuous cycle of self-improvement. And that happens too with men as they improve themselves and basically as they make themselves invulnerable. The ideal man is invulnerable. The ideal man is Achilles. Achilles had one little vulnerability. It was this big and it killed him.
Yeah.
So, he was as close to invulnerable as a man could be.
Yeah. For God's sake, if you're Achilles, just wear steel sandals, just strap on the ankle guards.
Wear steel sandals, try not to turn your back to the enemy. This will all help. But no, it is never in history been attractive for men to be vulnerable. Not in the way that it's promoted in pop psychology. In fact, even pop culture and pop psychology. For example, in psychology, they've taken the cluster of deficiencies and weaknesses, and they've created an entire, they've given the dysfunction a name so that they can label people or people can self-label. This way they turn from you're a person that needs to improve to, oh, you're a victim.
Yeah. Okay.
So they call it highly sensitive person. And this is a person that's very prone to negative emotions. They feel physically stressed. So, they get upset stomachs, headaches, whatever, when there's a lot of stress. They're very self-critical, afraid of rejection. But on the other hand, they're also not very accepting of critical feedback from others. So they'll say a lot of bad things internally. But if someone else says, oh, maybe you could do this better or that better, they'll freak out. They worry a lot. They overreact a lot. They have a lot of anger and resentment. And none of these are attractive qualities for men.
They've had a
the
name
main reason is
they've had a name for that. I think for a long time, at least in the Anglosphere, prior to the highly sensitive persons, we used to call them big girls' blouse. A big girl's blouse.
I love Australian sayings. You guys got some, and the British do too. They got some really interesting sayings. Yeah, it is. it is really it is a mixture of all of the negatives, because not all women are like this either, but it's the mixture of the negative narcissistic borderline personality issues that are commoner or more common in women. And then you add that along with the fact that it's a man. So you have a higher level of aggression, and you end up with basically some dangerous people. You know, these are the kind of people that lash out. You know, they're extremely concerned about the approval of potential sexual partners. So they'll come on real strong. If the woman says no, you know, maybe she's flattered at first, she takes the attention, it's very common. And then she'll say no because she recognizes he's not right. That's the kind of man that does the nice guy thing of then gets angry and says, oh, you don't like me, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
rather than understanding something wrong with
the
him.
gamma male.
Yeah, the gamma male. And can even be to the point of being violent. And it's something that if you're a father, look out for. If your daughter's dating a guy like this, watch out. You have, you know, a couple of decades to cultivate in your daughter what is a healthy view of masculinity. That means you have to reflect it yourself. Your male friends, your peer group should reflect it. And hopefully the young men that you allow your children to associate with should also reflect it. And she should know enough to reject men that demonstrate these qualities right off the bat.
Yes.
You were mentioning before an excellent example of someone publicly demonstrating this highly sensitive person type thing, this extreme vulnerability and weakness.
Yes.
Someone named Brian Stelter.
Yes, he's a CNN anchor on a soy-enriched diet. And so he tweeted, and you know, Mark Dice obviously jumped straight on this because he loves his CNN anchors, and plenty of people. I commented on this on one of my shows earlier this week, but his tweet was, "Last night I hit a wall, gutted by the death toll, disturbed by the government's shortcomings, dismayed by the political rhetoric that bears no resemblance to reality." This is a CNN anchor, funny. Worried about friends who are losing jobs, kids who are missing school, and senior citizens who are living in fear. I crawled in bed and cried for our pre-pandemic lives, tears that have been waiting a month to escape. I wanted to share it because it feels freeing to do so. Now is not a time for faux invincibility. Journos are living this, hating this, like everyone else. A tall assumption there. I'm not hating this.
Well, I want to point out something very important. You see, he had emotional stress. All men will go through emotional stress. In fact, studies show that men undergo a lot more emotional stress and are actually more affected by social stress than women are. And this is why we can't be vulnerable, because we have the weight of the world on our shoulders.
Yep. It
is extremely selfish to offload that onto other people so that you don't have to deal with your own business. Yes. That's not what a man does. A man deals with his own business so that he doesn't offload it either to his friends or to his wife or to his children.
Yes.
And you're going to run into that with a vulnerable man. He's going to want to offload his responsibilities onto other people because he just can't handle it.
Yeah, and to do it publicly to the whole world, essentially, as somebody is doing on social media in this way. Not only is it a big, fat, ugly, disgusting virtue signal, and even I think Tucker Carlson ridiculed him on his segment recently, and he was just like, ugh, barf, like, stop making it all about you. This is not about you. No one gives a damn about you in this situation or your feelings. And this is the reality of it, is when you have to publicly, as a man, like, it's a very feminine thing to do, and you're more likely to see women sharing their feelings in this way in the public sphere. And I find it pretty repugnant when they do as well, but I don't sit around worrying about it because they're women, they'll do what they do.
Well, and those women who are doing that are almost certainly either alone or in a relationship with one of these vulnerable men who can't handle them unloading to them, because that's where the women should be unloading to, is to their husband or their father if they're a child.
Yeah. And to be, as a husband, to be receptive to your woman's emotional outbursts, and to, again, to what I find in my experience, my wife wants more than anything is when she's upset is to be heard, and for me to just see it and be still, be a rock, not try to answer it, not try to fix it, not try to change it, and certainly not to go off the rails as well. but to be immovable emotionally, to be strong for her and allow her to have her moment, which always passes. And, you know, these things pass, but when you have to unleash them on the whole world, as a man, it is quite, my disgust reflex towards this sort of behavior in other men has my threshold for it has decreased significantly in recent months and years, for sure.
Well, and this is a natural thing to have a disgust of it and to have a very low tolerance for it. Back when we lived in small groups, if men like this were underminers, they would undermine the confidence of the male group. We had to have unreasonable optimism in order to survive when you're 120 people and there's maybe only 10 men in the group that are fit and healthy and young, and you got to go out and hunt woolly mammoths with a stick that has a pointy rock at the end, and you've got to fight a bunch of other guys literally hand to hand and bash somebody's skull in, otherwise they're going to take your women and children. To go through that kind of a history of thousands of years living like that, we had to be irrationally optimistic and stoic. Even if in the face of almost certain death, we had to believe we could win or we wouldn't fight. And men who are extremely vulnerable, first thing, prone to negative emotions. If you're extremely vulnerable, if you're extremely prone to negative emotions, extremely sensitive, you're going to demoralize your entire team. It's honestly better to slit that guy's throat and get him out of the group than to have him there, because he's a net negative. And our ancestors, that's how they would have thought, and any who didn't think like that wouldn't have survived. So we're descended from the people that had disgust for male vulnerability.
My father was a police officer for over a decade in Adelaide in South Australia, which was there was plenty for police to do in that particular period of Adelaide, serial killer capital of the world, and a great deal going on around the 80s and 90s. And my observation as a child was of him and his mates, his colleagues in the police, his brothers in arms, and they survived the constant war zone that they lived in, and the violence that they faced, and the threats that they faced, and the various enemies that they were up against. They faced it by developing a really macabre sense of humor and finding humor in really dark shit that no normal rational person would find funny. But they were in a war zone, and this is a normal male response, and it's because of the hierarchy and the necessity for them to be strong for each other and support each other. They all know it's twisted and wrong, and as they all left the police force later in life, and my dad became far less macabre, far more honest about the horrors that he witnessed. But while he was in that war zone, it was necessary for him to manage his own sense of horror and his own disturbance and his own trauma, and manage it so that he didn't become a weak link and put his partners at risk of death. A weak man in a battlefield can lead to the death of everybody. The guy who's weeping in the trenches and shaking and can't pick up his gun and fire at the enemy could be the difference between winning and losing the battle. And so, not to say that it's ideal for men to be that hard and that macabre, but it's necessary for the survival of the group. And so it's a normal male behavior, especially in a war. And we're in a war of our own, for our generation. We're in a culture war. And so it's necessary for us to have low tolerance for that level of weakness if we want to succeed, if we want to survive and win this war.
And a culture war is very unique because normally a war, men aren't sent very long into battle. They're in battle a very short period of time. Sometimes it's days. First and Second World War had longer periods because everyone was fighting. There was a shortage of men, but very often they're only there for a few days. They rotate out, they rotate back in. The culture war might last a few generations. In order to maintain ourselves over that long a period of time, we have to be right in our head. It's not going to be the group that is most numerous or the group that is richest or the group that is smartest that's going to survive. It's the group that can keep themselves psychologically healthy over the course of this fight that's going to win. And we see already, on the left, they're cracking because they've cultivated weakness as a virtue. And we have to be careful that we don't do that in our circles. We don't want to cultivate weakness as a virtue. We want to have strength as our virtue. And it is interesting because the sensitive, the overly sensitive, overly vulnerable man is one end of a dysfunctional spectrum. But there is another end to that dysfunctional spectrum too. That's the man who cannot access his emotions, who it becomes emotionally dead.
Yeah.
Because the emotions are there. There is no, unless you have some sort of traumatic brain injury, there is no man that doesn't have emotions. Okay. There are also some genetic causes, but this is very rare. Not having any emotions is actually demotivating. There's a reason why we say emotions motivate. Our emotions help to motivate us.
Yes.
The thing is that the vulnerable and the fragile, highly sensitive person, man, he has no control over his emotions. His emotions are in charge of his decision making. Whereas the healthy man, he has emotions. He has very strong emotions, but he has them under control. The man that has no emotions is just as unattractive to women as the man that's overly emotional.
Perhaps not perhaps not as instantly disgusting to them. They might enjoy a hard man for a while, but when they eventually want to break through and see that softer side, and it's not there, then they'll figure out they're not that into it.
Well, what women say to me is women are very emotional beings, and they really enjoy the emotional roller coaster. Okay, but they don't like to ride the emotional roller coaster alone. And they
take you for the ride.
Yes, exactly. And they find a man who has no emotions, who is emotionless, who is basically numb. They find that kind of a man boring. He doesn't know how to create emotions in them. If you want to make a connection with a woman, create some emotions in her. There's a reason why all of the typical first date things, you take a woman to eat, she's going to get pleasure and joy from food. You take a woman to a movie because the movies are an emotional ride. They take you through a series of emotions using theater to do that. And a movie with no emotional tone isn't going to be remembered, isn't going to be popular. Believe it or not, a lot of people used to take their first dates to a carnival.
Yes.
There's excitement. You go on roller coasters, you have rides, you have a bit of a thrill. One thing that works really well is take her shooting.
Yeah.
It's for, especially if the woman's never shot before, it's scary, it's thrilling, and there you are making her feel comfortable in the middle of this. Taking women on these emotional journeys is fun, and it's really important for making that connection with them, because they need to understand that you have emotions, that you have a good grip on them, because otherwise you're going to be a terrible father. If you don't have any emotions and you're incapable of displaying them and incapable of having empathy with other people's emotions, you're going to treat your children that way too. How are you going to, children are even more emotional than women because they have no filter. They have no control. Baby feels something, they just act out on it. And over time they will develop that. But it takes a while. My son is 6. He still will go through periods where he will react completely emotionally and irrationally. In fact, probably that's half of what a 6-year-old does.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time for them to get to the point where they have control over their emotions. And they women who want to have a kid, they need to know that as a man, you have them and you're in control of those emotions.
Yes. And this is the thing, is that the Brian Stelter tweet there is he's sort of, while he's sort of shitting on strong men for what he calls faux invincibility, he himself is virtue signaling that he's controlled himself for months and bottled this up for months, and now he's just letting it all pour out. But he actually doubled down in a segment after that tweet where he talked about it again. He talked about it on live national television and was saying that he was trying to write whatever article he had to write that night, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't finish it. He just had to crawl into bed and cry. And so it is ultimately, it's emotional incontinence, and it stopped him from getting his shit done. It stopped him from doing his business. And, women want to see that a man can cut the emotions off when necessary to get stuff done. And if you're lying around, I just need a dune a day. I just feel really sad for the world and I can't work and make a living. No woman worth being with is ever going to find that remotely attractive. And if she does, you should get the hell out of there. But, you know,
well, there are women that want it. There are women that want an adult child, essentially.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
that's a dysfunctional relationship. I have seen relationships like that, and very early on, the sex ends because women don't want to have sex with children. If they see you as a child, they're not going to want to have sex with you. Yeah. And it becomes an absolute horror show for everybody involved. Even worse if kids end up coming along the way in the first part of the marriage. And it is really a terrible thing. Like there are, you know, anyone can attract someone if they lower their standards enough. Okay.
Yeah.
That is not a way to run your life. You know, lower your standards until you find something. It means you will be unhappy at the end. There are some people that in their current state, they just shouldn't get into a relationship. Yes. They should upgrade themselves so they can get someone where they don't have to lower their standards. Then you'll be happy.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. And I guess the other thing I wanted to comment on from what you were discussing before is we've been speaking about emotions as though they're this monolithic thing. And obviously emotions are complex and there's many different emotions to feel. And all of them have their moment where they're appropriate and their degree of expression that's appropriate given the situation. You know, as I mentioned before, my dad was a cop. He you know, came out of that career with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it put him in a lowered control of his emotions in various situations, you know, and he went from being extremely stoic a lot of the time to having moments of breakdown. But these emotions do need to move. They need to be, they don't need to be denied. They just need to be channeled appropriately. And he worked really hard at rebuilding himself and succeeded at that after, you know, quite some time, and really is a much more healthy and stable man now than he was after he left the police force. But to witness a man who I was very close to and who was my role model and who I still love and admire, to see him go through that rebuilding process where he upgraded himself over time and got control again over the parts that haunted him. That was a really powerful thing to experience. But it didn't mean getting control of his emotions didn't mean that he shut them all off. Just the ones that didn't serve him. And there are emotions that are so necessary and so attractive to women to be expressed freely. One is delight. You know, this is one that my wife, I know, really appreciates in me, is I have always freely expressed my delight in her, in my children, in the life that I have, my joy, you know, and my hope, my optimism. These are emotional experiences that I have that, you know, I can just allow those to flow freely because they don't introduce anything negative. They don't impose any cost on her or the children. And in fact, they bring life to our family, and they're a really positive emotional state. So that doesn't need to be controlled. It doesn't get in the way. It fuels us.
Absolutely. And even some of the so-called negative emotions, for example, most people, I don't, but most people would classify anger as a negative emotion. I think it depends what you're angry about and what you're doing with it.
Yeah.
But I have coached couples where she is intentionally poking him because she wants to see the bear. And she says, I'm very frustrated because he never gets angry. And what do you mean? And she says, they don't quite understand it, but they understand that he should have this reaction to get angry when I poke him. And what she's looking for is, if my husband is in a place where he's getting poked, can he react with anger and aggression to protect himself? Now, this doesn't mean he would get angry and yell and scream at her, but he would get sufficiently angry to end the interaction and take control of the situation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's not that what it is it's within control, and it's that we're capable of showing the wide range of human emotions. I think a person that can't show any emotions isn't really completely alive. You know, if you can't show the emotions, you're not completely alive. There's something inside you has died.
Yeah.
I've seen, and there are people, for example, that they're stuck on one emotion. This happens to a lot of men after divorce. So they get divorced. they're stuck on anger and sadness. And these emotions aren't, someone's mowing the lawn, just a second.
Yell at them in Portuguese.
Yeah, they're mowing the lawn in Portuguese.
You gotta like get the hand out the window. Hey, what are you doing? You gotta
yeah, what's wrong with you? Actually, Portuguese they're pretty calm people. But yeah, you know what? What was I saying? Yeah, you need to have that broad range of emotions, and sometimes men get stuck on one emotion or the other, and that can really hinder and inhibit their ability to move forward. Now, most people have not been taught how to regulate their emotions by their father. That's who teaches us normally how to regulate your emotions.
Yep.
And so they either in an they say, I just got to shut them off because I can't regulate them, and they become very cold.
Yeah.
Or they say, it hurts too much to control them, so I'm going to let them all out all the time. And then they become these overly sensitive men. And neither of those solutions are healthy. And it's not about coming to the middle. It's about getting off that entire dysfunctional spectrum. And I don't believe that people can do it on their own. I've never seen anyone just decide, no, I'm going to get off. I'm going to be fine and just make it happen. You need the influence and help of people who have their emotions well regulated and who know how to regulate their emotions to teach you. You know, this is a big part of what I do in coaching and in agency training is I help men and women as well to take the chaos of their emotions and to organize them. In some cases, that means helping them to learn how to express emotions in a healthy way. Sometimes that means teaching them how to control their emotions and push them into a box until they can deal with them later. For men especially, it's very important that we can take our emotions, put them in a box, stick them away, and come back to them later. We do have to come back to them, or that is kind of like cleaning your house by putting everything in a bag and throwing it in a room. Eventually the room fills up and starts to overflow the rest of your house. Yes, there are people that clean their houses that way, but you have to deal with that.
Learning to manage the build of that pressure and having your hand on the release valve so that it doesn't blow of its own accord, but you can go off to a contextual situation that's not going to harm your business, not going to harm your relationships, not going to harm yourself, and open that release valve, depending on what it is. It might be, for some men who have to deal with some trauma, it might be, like Brian Stelter, to crawl into bed and cry. But that doesn't mean you have to tweet it to the whole world and let everyone know about it. You don't have to be public in your emotions and impose a cost on everyone in that way. You can release your emotions in a therapeutic session, in a coaching session. You can go unleash your rage on a boxing bag. That's a great way to get the rage out of yourself. There are plenty of ways to do it, and also through the stories we tell, the narratives we speak aloud.
Yeah, sometimes when the pressure of too much emotions is overwhelming and we haven't dealt with it for years, and we've gone a long time without proper strategies to manage emotions, we'll need to do this total just blow off, and that might be like you said, cry in the room. Once we get it under control, that's energy. We don't want to blow off emotional energy if we don't need to. We want to harness it instead. You mentioned a blow off valve. So on a steam engine, you have an overpressure valve so that if it gets too hot, the overpressure valve, the pressure gets too intense, it'll blow off instead of destroying the machine. And a lot of people think that steam engines are something from the 18th or the 19th century. But actually, most of our energy today, if your country uses nuclear power, comes from steam engines. The heat provided by nuclear, but it runs a steam engine. Yes. So they're still an important part of modern technology. And the way they work is they take heat and pressure and they turn it into work. You can take that heat and pressure of your emotional system and you can learn to redirect that into motivation, into work, and get stuff done with it.
If that energy is not being continuously channeled into productive, generation of wealth, which is what power is, then you have to blow off you have to open the release, the blow off valve. And the ideal, as you're getting at, is to not ever have to do that because you're channeling all that energy in the right directions constantly.
Yeah, and a great example of that is easier for people to attempt without, it can take a little while to learn how to channel that economically. But if you like to lift weights, go to the gym, get under the squat bar, but instead of thinking about lifting the weight, think this is a tree on top of a loved one, and if I don't lift this off, it's going to squish them. Now get under that and really think like that, and get under that weight and see how much easier it is, because you've just channeled your fear of losing a loved one, your love for them, and all this other stuff. You get stronger. You become stronger.
I've had this visualization when I've been doing chin-ups, with the sort of lat pulls like this, imagining that I'm on the edge of a cliff and I've got my wife on my back and one son on each leg, and of course there's crocodiles in the river below, and I've got to get up there. So imagining myself to be much, much heavier than I actually am, but I'm laden with the most precious cargo in the whole world to me. And I've found way better results in my performance when I visualize in that way. And I've then incorporated my children into it for real, not the crocodiles as a threat, but begin to increase the weight, and the boys love being on my back when I'm doing push-ups and that sort of thing. So get your family involved in your mind.
Yes, and I gave us in that using these kind of thoughts actually help us to train our brain to use the emotions positively, and eventually that'll have carryover into other areas of life. I gave a speech years ago, and I said, ask people to estimate how long they could hold on to a branch from a tree. Okay, so you're 10 feet up in the air, 3 meters up in the air, holding on to a branch of a tree. How long can you hold on? And people, minute, 2 minutes, depends how young and fit they are. And I said, okay, now imagine that underneath that tree is a lion. And if you let go, he's going to eat you. How long do you think you can hold on to the tree now? Oh, I could hold on to the tree as long as I need to hold on to. I could be there for an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
A week.
Nothing changed physically about them. Nothing changed, but they became stronger. Yeah. This is when we talk about the strength of mind. This is what we mean. And strength of mind comes through training like this, and it comes through training with emotions. Well-harnessed emotions, strengthening our mind and enabling us to blast through difficulties. I have clients that have a hard time, they work at home. Well, everyone works at home right now, but they work at home and they get distracted by YouTube videos. They get distracted by all kinds of things. And you can't sit there and watch them. And no system that you put in place will work if they don't want it to work. One of the real keys to helping people with this type of distraction problem is to help them to visualize the future that they will have if they concentrate, and the future they will have if they goof off. And to start seeing those two things bifurcate every time they pick a decision. Yep. And this really makes a big difference to their emotional commitment to completing their work. I have clients, they want to get married and start a family. And I say, imagine your children as if they were real human beings that you haven't met your wife yet, but imagine what your kids would be like. Okay. Imagine your wife, imagine that family, that life. Imagine yourself on your deathbed surrounded by your loved ones, your children, your grandchildren, even your great-grandchildren. And imagine that all of that's going to be taken away from you if you don't pay attention and you don't get your work done and you don't, do your best at the things you're doing. And every time you want to slip, see that vision fade away a little bit. And every time you work hard, see it become more clear again. This does a lot to channel the emotions into a positive outcome, into real work. And this type of technique is why people go to coaches. They go through for the help in visualizing that. And it's more than just understanding. It's more than just knowing a bunch of tricks. It's understanding what people need and giving them the specific help that they need.
Yeah. And also hugely, and it's hugely important when you take on a coach, is having somebody that you can be continually accountable for as long as you need to be. It's not forever.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's for as short a time as possible, just a season of transition from a level of unnecessary vulnerability or weakness into a time of strength and control and agency where you don't need the coach after that.
Yeah.
It's different for every person how long it is.
Yeah, if you can internalize the coach, you know, when I hear the voices of the people who have coached me in the past,
Yes.
when I'm writing something or about to do something, or I'm thinking, is this good enough? And I will hear the coaches from the people that have helped me in the past. What would so-and-so say? And that is like having them there all the time. And that only works if you spend enough time with them that you can internalize some of their thinking patterns.
Well, that's right. So the accountability is you show up, you know, weekly, you show up every time and you continue to do the work. You take the actions that are suggested, you take on the challenge, and you're honest when you fail, and then you keep moving forward, so that eventually, rather than, you know, you invest the time and the money and the commitment, and you take the risk, and you go through the pain, so that one day, rather than continuing to pay Noah on a weekly basis as your coach, or paying me as a weekly coach, you have for free for the rest of your life the Noah Force Ghost hovering on your shoulder, and the James Force Ghost following you around and coaching you forever, because, as you say, you've internalized the voice, and you've come to know somebody mind to mind and be able to anticipate what they would say, what criticism, judgment, advice they would offer for the particular problem that you're facing, or for the crossroads that you stand at. You'd know which way they would tell you to go. And, you know, men who have had positive role models in their fathers or grandfathers or uncles or guys around them, their various mentors, will often, you know, cite the mind of that deceased, long since dead person. For me, it's my grandfather. You know, I often hear the voice of my grandfather as a guiding force for me. Conversations we never had, they're not memories, but it's, you know, what would granddad do? What would granddad think? And having that internalized model.
And if you're a father, it's a kind of immortality, because much of what we are, we inherited from our ancestors, who inherited it from their ancestors, going back to the first men. We too can pass that down through our children. We can pass, and of course we want to pass the good stuff and leave the bad stuff, because otherwise we have an accumulation of errors over time. But pass on to our son. I used to do this with my son when he would, you know, when he was a baby, around a year old, he had a lot of colic. And it was weird because it was later than they normally get colic, and it caused him a lot of pain, and he would cry a lot. And I would hold him and I would walk him through breathing exercises, getting him to do deep breathing, and say, whenever you're in pain, hear my voice, and I want you to start to count backwards from 10 and breathe deeply each time. And even though he was not completely verbal at that point, he would start to do it, and I would hear him calm his breath. He would get into that pattern, and even though he's in pain, he would be able to get control of himself so that he could function again. And now if I see him get hurt, he immediately goes into, I see him get hurt, I can see him close his eyes a little and start to breathe and start to work that pain out that way. And it's something that's internalized now. It's part of who he is. It'll last for the rest of his life. And this is really what it means to be a patriarch, is to pass on this kind of wisdom to our children.
Yeah, absolutely. And that voice, your voice, will be there when he's an old man and he's having difficulty breathing or he's in pain. You know, he will remember that voice, and he will have passed it to his children. And, you know, God willing, he'll have great grandchildren running around who also have your voice recycled through several generations. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to offer that to our children, and for us to also have, I guess, an excess of that wisdom, because we've been the fortunate recipients of it from our various mentors, from our ancestors. That for men in particular out there who may not have had such good role models and may be really struggling with all kinds of problems, we can become that voice for you too. We can't be your dad, but we can be your coach. And a coach is a fine substitute for a dad for this particular season of your life, if you need help to push through something and pick up those tools and pick up a voice to be a guide through it.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, did we get through the
Yeah, we
extent
went
of our
through all the
topic tonight?
information that we had.
We've blitzed it.
We're we're getting disciplined. We're doing the actual
Yeah.
the Patriarch hour as an hour now.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'll check in with the chats briefly. I don't know if there's any questions, but I'll say hi to a few folks. Hats off, and shout out to Port Film Co-op, who's here as ever, being our loyal and faithful moderator and reminding people where to find us. Thank you for bearing with our weak streaming tech tonight. The upload rate has been all over the shop, but with the coaching of Port Film Co-op, everyone has known what to do to drag back and to watch it as smoothly as possible. And thanks to Cresho and MGTOW's Greatest Hits, Brucey Boy, and MDQ, I haven't seen you here before, says, glad to catch you on live for once. Hi from France. Bonjour to you as well. And to Tion. Welcome to Tion. Good to see you here again. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys. We're gonna wrap it up a little early tonight. We've come in at under an hour, so I think that compensates for the several times that we've gone up to 2 hours. And it looks like you'll be able to have your lunch on time today, Noah.
Ah, that's awesome.
Excellent. Well, I'll look forward to...
Gotta feed the muscles.
Absolutely, yeah. Pump that. You got to eat your protein. Pump it in there. Inject it straight in. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. This has been the 14th episode of Patriarch Hour, and we'll be back at the same time next Thursday night from 10:30 Sydney and Melbourne time, which is immediately after the Uncockables live stream. Noah, thanks for joining me once more.
My pleasure.
Excellent. All right, we'll see you all in the future. And those of you who are already subscribers, make sure you tune in nice and early tomorrow morning. I'll be speaking to another fascinating patriarch. E. Michael Jones will be coming on live with me at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Sydney and Melbourne time. So come along and bring your shekels for super chats, because I will relay your questions to the good doctor if you have them with you. Join me tomorrow morning on the James Fox Higgins Show. This has been Patriarch Hour. Stay well, patriarchs, and see you on championsofthelight.com. Adios, amigos.
What's the one thing that successful CEOs and sports athletes have in common? They all have coaches and mentors. A good coach can help you to notice opportunities that you may have otherwise missed, and to successfully negotiate dangers and risks. With my help, my clients have been able to find true love, to get married, to have children, to create successful companies, to overcome debilitating anxiety and depression, to get raises at work, and to create a life that they feel happy with. We're about to hit a time of unprecedented opportunity. And those who have got their minds, their hearts, and their lives organized right now are going to be the ones that are able to take advantage of that opportunity. It can be you. Contact me now so that I can help you to become the best that you can be.
Noah is absolutely right that it takes coaches and mentors to help us be the best that we can be. So definitely get in touch with Noah if you like his style, if you've been enjoying his contributions at Patriarch Hour and you think he's the coach for you, definitely get in touch with him. I take a different approach to Noah, but I also work as a coach, and I love to work with men and women and families to help you to see the things that you can't see. I've got a high IQ, I've got a lot of life experience, I've worked with people from all different walks of life, and I myself am 10 years happily married with 2 beautiful children and a really blessed life that I have deliberately crafted for myself by making good decisions, and that I continue to sustain by making good decisions and by trying to always know myself and see the unseen. Now, I've picked up a lot of tools along my path of learning about myself that I can share with you. And also I have a very strong perception of the problems that people face, and I see patterns that other people don't see. This is one of the gifts that God has given me, to recognize the patterns of behavior that you might not be able to see. It takes a third person perspective sometimes to recognize why we are in the situations that we are in. And I've worked with many people over the years and helped many people to break out of situations that were difficult for them, to find God if that's something that you're looking for, or to at least find a way to change those patterns of behavior that you feel trapped in. I'd love to work with you, so please get in touch with me if you'd like to work with me, and I'd love to take you on as a client. Thanks for watching Patriarch Hour. Noah and I will see you next time.